Well, welcome everyone to today's episode of TMI Advice You Didn't Want. Today we're talking about Christmas because next week is Christmas, which I cannot freaking believe. Where did 2024 go? I have no idea. But in case we haven't met, my name is Karen.
And my name is Ashley. And yeah, I look back at what happened like this last year, like thinking about last Christmas, and it seems like it was like 4 years ago.
Mm,
And it seems like so much happened that I can't believe that that all happened in that year.
mm-hmm,
But at the same time, it's like that was like fast,
mm-hmm.
like
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, for sure. And I feel the same way. Like it feels like it went so fast, but also so much happened. Like
Mhm.
since last Christmas, I left a business partnership. I ending up working a little bit more at the hospital so that I could like make things work, I started doing TikTok shop. I started doing all kinds of other things that were bringing in money. And it's like, how did that all happen in a year? I started doing NCS training for Dr. Joe. Like, how did all that happen in a year? I have no idea.
Mhm.
I just kind of look back at this year and I'm like, that was a whirlwind. I don't
Mhm.
really know what to do with 2024. I really thought it was going to end up being a totally different year than what it was, because like
100%.
we talk a lot about how 2024 in numerology is like an abundance year. And my thought initially was, oh, because I was in that other business, I was like, oh, maybe this could be like abundance within this business. But I think for me, it was abundance in realizing that I wanted freedom and that I want how I wanted freedom and
Mhm.
what that actually looked like. Like I think that we think of, I know I do, and I always correct myself. If you ever hear me say anything, it's because I'm talking to myself, not to anybody else. But I always think of or have in the past, let's frame it like that, have thought of abundance mainly as money, but that is not true. And abundance for me this year really did look like looking at my life and going, but what do I actually want to create? And then taking steps towards that. I had
Mhm.
abundance in relationships. I had abundance in, I mean, I did have abundance in money as well. It just didn't always come in the form that I expected or maybe even wanted, but that's
Mhm.
okay too.
Yeah.
Things don't have to come. This is the other thing that abundance can be, realizing that things don't have to come the way that you expect, and just having abundance with allowance as well. I think that I keep talking to people and myself, especially within the last like 2 days or whatever. I keep hearing people be like, oh, I'm having a hard time right now. And I think a lot of us are going through this phase where it's like we need to allow
Yeah.
what is going on in our lives. I
Mhm.
know you and I, Ashley, have been talking about things where, like, for you, for example, have been like, yeah, I am struggling with allowing at this point. And you're not the only one that said that to me. I just talked to someone else that was like, oh my God, I'm having such a hard time allowing this to happen. And I noticed, like, within the past 2 days, I have found myself in that space as well, where I'm like, I need to allow. I need to notice that I'm feeling this, allow myself to feel it, and then also allow this experience to be beautiful as it currently is.
Yeah. Well, I think that's like the big thing. Like looking back at this abundant year, it had so many setbacks, like so many things that it was like, oh my gosh, like that is insane. Like I can't believe that happened. But then so many amazing things too. And it's kind of like Napoleon Hill says, with every like setback, there's an equal seed of opportunity
Yeah.
of rising above that. And
Isn't it
um
like equal or more? Is
yeah,
that
equal
right?
or
Yeah,
greater.
equal or
Yeah, he
greater.
does say
Yeah, yeah,
equal
yeah.
or greater.
Yeah.
And I was reading like a book by Tim Ferriss called Titans while I was on holidays just recently, and this guy talked about how he wanted to be this nomad, and he would travel all over the world. And his mom was like, "Oh my gosh, stop doing this! You're going to all these dangerous places, these places where there's war. Like, stop going." And so he was being interviewed by Tim Ferriss, and he's like, yeah, the one time, because he was training athletes, he's like, the one time something bad actually happened was I was training athletes in the US during the Boston bombing for the marathon. And he's like, there, I'm in my hometown. Like, bad things can happen everywhere. You just got to have openness and trust. And most people are better than you think they and are more willing to help than you think they would, even like to a stranger. And Tim Ferriss was like, well, you have had bad stuff happen to you. Like, didn't you like have your whole, like, he lived in a van. He's like, didn't you have your whole van stolen? And he's like, oh yeah, but that was a good thing. And Tim was like, how was having your whole home vehicle and all of your belongings stolen? He's like, well, the night before was my birthday, and I had been debating like going like true nomad style, which is like a backpack.
Mm.
And so I was out with friends for my birthday, and that's when my van got stolen. And he's like, I was given coconuts, and I was given a book about being a monk, and being present in the moment, and something else. I can't remember what it was. And so he got these three gifts for his birthday, and then he realized his van was stolen the next morning after he left his friend's house. And he was like, okay, I'm going full nomad.
Mm.
I had been debating this, and this is my opportunity to do it because my home was just literally taken. And so then he's like, what else did I have to do but sit down and read the book about what I wanted to be more like and be present, and it's eat and drink some coconuts.
Yeah.
And he was just like, cool. And to him, it was not a bad thing that had happened.
Hmm.
And then he's like, other situations happen too where things would happen, but I saw them as opportunities, not bad
Absolutely.
things.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah.
so like that's like there's definitely some things in my life right now that feel like just bad things. And I haven't experienced that seed of greatness. But the majority of the things that were like, oh man, that like really fucking sucks. The majority of those have come back tenfold,
Hmm.
like 100%, set up in crazy ways. And we joke about a lot of it because like you said, we've experienced so much abundance in so many different ways. And um it's been never in a way that we expected.
Hmm.
We've had a lot of drama with my father-in-law, so my partner's dad, and he's been trying to um destroy one of our businesses, for lack of a better word, than destroy. And so my partner's cut off all communication with his dad, and who also owns a business similar kind of thing. So, like for me, when I started my business, my dad, who owns multiple businesses, kind of helped me, supported me, encouraged me, promoted me, you know what I mean? And was like a father like figure for, and was my father, but like a father like figure, but also in business. And so Derek had the exact opposite happening over and over and over again. And he randomly called up a guy that he used to work with right when he was starting out his business. And this guy has a business in a similar way as well. And he talks to him every day and he runs things by him. This guy bought him like $1,000 tool setup as a gift and was like, hey, I just want to help you out. Like, you're a great guy. Here you go. And um, just like it's been unreal.
Yeah.
And the support. And so just yesterday I was joking with Derek. I'm like, it's like you have a new dad. Like
Mm.
it's this guy is your father figure. Like right when your one father was taken away, like taken away, not actually, but like removed from your life, another one stepped in.
Mm.
Another one that doesn't have a toxic past with you, that doesn't treat you in toxic ways now. Because even before this all happened, there was toxic emotional stuff going on.
Mm.
And he's like this unbelievably caring, giving, like one of the, like I haven't really interacted with him much, but from what I've seen, one of the most selfless people I've met.
Mm.
And he's just like pouring into him in every way possible and will call him just to talk. And I'm like, that's better than what you could have ever have hoped for from your biological
Absolutely.
father.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a random weird story that, and like who would have ever thought that he would have had this random new father figure in his life?
Yeah. Yeah. I do think too, like kind of like connecting it a little bit to like the Christmas thing too is just looking at like Thanksgiving's like this too, because it's about like looking back and being grateful for what this year brought. But what's the gift? Like,
Mhm.
what's the gift that this situation brought? Like, I think that that's so important. And this is something I really want to lean into so much coming into 2025, right? Every situation, regardless of what energy I put behind it, whether it's good, bad, ugly, or whatever, it doesn't matter. What is the gift that this situation is,
Mhm.
regardless of what I think about it, right? Because I could think, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. Or I could sit back and be like, but wait a minute, how can I be the observer in my life and
Mhm.
actually realize that I don't have to have an emotional charge with this? I don't have to
Mhm.
feel a certain way. I can just look at
Yeah.
the situation and ask myself, well, what am I supposed to learn, or what is coming for me that's better than what I thought? Like
Mhm.
this is a process. This is not something that I feel like any of us just wake up tomorrow and go, I know how to do this, because it
Yeah.
really is. It's a process. There are people that have been doing this for years and they still will have to come up against themselves because
Mhm.
we all have been programmed by our 3D reality to
Yeah.
forget that we're the creator. We've all been programmed that way to forget when we step into a state of any kind of fight or flight, or we step into any kind of stress, we forgot we're a creator. And then
Mhm.
that's when the game's on, when we realize, oh yeah, I forgot. I need to
Mhm.
step back into my creation again. I need to
Yeah.
step back into the flow.
Yeah.
And I feel like this conversation is really revitalizing for me because this is like something that, like, this is helping me really release the past couple days. Because I had an experience on Tuesday where I was working with a surgeon that is not really, he makes me uncomfortable because of the speed at which he wants you to work and the speed at which he wants to work. Makes
Mhm.
me very uncomfortable. And that day started me into a state of fight or flight. And then I've been able to be like, okay, I don't need to continue feeling this way. Until yesterday, something happened and my body decided it wanted to just full on fight or flight last night, right? 4 a.m., fight or flight. Just
Mhm.
that's where I was, right? And so it's in those moments where we can look at the situation as a gift, because it's like, yeah, this is a gift because it's making me realize how much more I need to let go, how much
Yeah.
more I need to allow,
Yeah.
instead of me feeling like I need to control the situation. And the past couple days, I've had that pressure on my throat. We've talked about this on this podcast before. I think on our last couple sessions or something, where I figured out that this pressure on my throat is me trying to control, or me
Mhm.
feeling like I don't have control. And it
Yeah.
stems from my third center, right? So my third center, it's almost like this cancer that builds in my body that goes into all areas of my body, where it's
Mhm.
like it starts with that third center where I feel like I need to control it, right? But
Yeah.
I can't. And so now it's stemming into my throat and making me feel like I'm choking myself,
Yeah.
right? Like these are the things that, like, as you start to become aware and as I start to look at myself, I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore. And the
Mhm.
beautiful thing about our body, it's really a gift. A lot of us are like, oh my God, I have this ache, I have this pain, I have this whatever going on, or this disease. Your body's just trying to give you a gift. Your
Yeah.
body is literally just trying to say, hey, you need to notice this.
Yeah.
You need to either slow down, or you need to notice how you're reacting to situations.
Mhm.
And one of my friends this morning said to me, she's like, because I was verbalizing to her, I was like, this is what my body did last night. Like I went into massive fight or flight. She's like, I love that you verbalized it, because for me, whenever I verbalize something like that, I don't react anymore.
Mhm.
I'm actually labeling it and then going, I don't want to do this anymore. This is the thing I don't want to do. And so
Mhm.
she's like, I love that you're verbalizing it and that you have, this is the really important piece too. She said, I love that you have a plan of action to help
Mhm.
yourself with it as well.
Yeah.
Because we can't just verbalize it. We can't just say, oh, this is the worst and this is what's happening. Like there's no plan of action for what you're going to do. with
Yeah.
that feeling, with, okay, wait a minute, like I can feel this feeling, I can experience it, I can allow it, and then I can move through it, right?
Hmm.
If you don't have a plan of action, you're literally just reliving the last day that you had over and over again. You're living Groundhog Day because you're living in your past. You're just
Yeah.
telling people, oh, this is the thing that I'm struggling with. Oh, this is the thing that I hate in my life. And you're just reliving it over and over again every time you bring it up in your thoughts and your feelings.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I watched a Christmas movie that's kind of along these lines. It's
Mm.
not a Christmas movie I recommend for entertainment at all.
What's
It's
the movie?
it's I Love the Coopers or
Okay,
something
never
with the
heard of it.
Coopers.
Okay.
Um and so it's a new movie. I think it's on Netflix and on Prime.
Mm.
It has the guy from Roseanne. It has Amanda Seyfried, I think is her name. Like it's packed with like tons of like recognizable actors and actresses. And it talks about all these different people from this family. And it would be, I think, 3 or 4 generations and all the problems that they have from their point of view, from their perspective. So a lot of like outlining their childhood trauma and why they have that childhood trauma and how it has taken over their life. And
Mm.
how, because they have that childhood trauma, going home for Christmas is like fucking hell.
Mm.
And so I think everything that we've talked about ties really well into that of um being aware of what's triggering you, understanding that you can take those setbacks and turn them into something good. But a
Mm.
lot of us just stay victim, especially in our childhood trauma, because it's been so ingrained in us and so rooted in us for so long because it started in our childhood. And so Christmas literally is one of the worst times of year for a lot of people.
For a
And
lot,
I
yeah.
know
Hmm.
Halloween has always been my favorite holiday because there's not the same like expectations. There's not the same like you have to be with all of your family that triggers you kind of thing. And so it totally makes sense. And at the end of the movie, it talks about how if only we realized we all had exactly what we wanted,
Mm.
but our trauma was keeping us from realizing it. And
Ugh.
I
That what you
know,
just said right there.
yeah,
Hello.
I know. And in that moment, I like, because I was like I do my own nails and I do them while watching a movie. So I'm like, not even half watching it, I'm like a quarter watching it. But when that line happened, I was like, holy shit. And it was like a huge download happened like in me. And so, like, the whole process, I almost turned off the movie like 100 times because it's not enjoyable at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I'm doing my nails, whatever. It's going to take me more time to find something good than to turn this thing off. And then that last moment, I was just like, wow, like stuff about my kids, stuff about my partner, stuff about my family, like all these things. It was like just so many downloads about my personal life. And yeah, it was huge. And so that's the thing to remember at Christmas time, like really be aware of what is it that's triggering you
Mm.
and how can you set it up for an advantage, or how can you, instead of giving attention to that negative trigger, look at something else that's there that you're grateful for and realize that you have everything in front of you that you want and need, but you're putting too much energy into being a victim or living in the past, or allowing your triggers to completely take over.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, as you said, what a lot of us do is we live as in that victimhood because that's what we're used to. Like, right? Like, this is where that whole Groundhog Day comes in. Our
Mhm.
body now becomes that subconscious mind. And now our body is running the show. We're not necessarily thinking on a conscious level of what we want to do anymore. I mean, you look
Mhm.
at driving a car, okay? A lot of us don't even have to think about what we do when we get in the driver's seat. And some
Yeah.
of us, like myself, have driven places and then thought, how did I get here?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Because you're
Yeah.
just completely on autopilot because you've done it so many times. But think about when you first jumped behind that wheel as a teenager. It was probably a little bit like, ooh, I got to do this. And then I have to put my foot on the brake and then put it into gear. And then I make sure that everything's in set. And then I'm pulling away. Which one's the brake? Which one's the accelerator? Right? Like we had to have more of
Yeah.
a conscious thought that went with it. So
Mm-hmm.
the thing that like as we're becoming aware, like as we're becoming aware of driving and what we do, we have to watch ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, how come I did that? Oh, because there's a car in front of me that stopped, so I put my foot on the brake, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the same thing in our life. We have to become so aware of what's going on in front of us. And then, as you said, the triggers. Well, this happened. And so I reacted that way. And that's how I've always done that. But is that how I want to continue to do that?
Yeah.
Right? Is that effective for me to keep doing that, to keep experiencing that over and over again? Because when I react like that, I create this. And
Mm-hmm.
getting to this level of awareness is sometimes it's not an easy process because you really got to look at yourself. You really got to become the observer of your own life. You really have to go, okay, I just did that.
Yeah.
And is that actually effective? I just reacted again. I just, I'm continuing this, right? I said to you this morning, Ashley, I think I said this to you. I'll say it again, but um, the thing that has kept me stuck in my life and in my business is this what I just talked about, like catastrophizing, getting into the worst case scenario and getting my body into that fight or flight, right? Catastrophizing and feeling like I don't have control.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's the thing that since I was a child, I can look back at my childhood and be like, "Ooh, I did this even then." Oh my
Yeah.
God. And I learned that from my parents. I can
100%.
see my parents doing that. And
Yeah.
so I learned a lot of my coping mechanisms from them, right? And man, all I gotta say is I look at kids and I'm like, man, they're a fucking mirror. Like I look at my brother's my nieces, his two kids, and I'm like, oh my God, there's such a mirror of him and my sister-in-law. Like
Yeah.
it's wild. And
Mm-hmm.
the thing that I really realized, and I knew this, but I didn't know this until I really watched them, is that if you want to know what your shortcomings are, I said this to Matthew, if you want to know what your shortcomings are, have kids. You'll see.
Yes. Oh,
You'll
yeah.
see.
Yeah. And if you want to know what childhood trauma you haven't dealt with, they'll show you.
Absolutely.
They will they will do something that you weren't allowed to do or something like that, and it will trigger you. And it's insane.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. So, in a lot, like Matthew and I were talking about this, we're like, oh my God, like I say this all the time, but like I'm glad we don't have kids because like I have to look at myself daily and then looking at a kid that's mirroring me back to me. Oof, that's really painful too. Right?
yeah.
Like I look at the tantrums that my nieces have and I'm like, my brother said stuff like or says stuff like that, like or
Yeah.
I see my sister-in-law doing stuff like that. I'm like, oof. If I was to
Mm-hmm.
have kids, I would see all of it just thrown back at me. Like that's
100%.
that is humbling. It is
Mm-hmm.
so humbling just to look at that in that way. Just looking at yourself in that way and being like, okay, this is what I'm doing right now. And that's not how I want to continue to react. But then having kids like really mirroring it. Crazy, crazy, crazy. So,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. So, but anyways, um, so as far as like Christmas is just, as you said, such a time for a lot of people that a lot of triggers do come up too. So
Mm-hmm.
really noticing as we're going through this year, like what triggers us, like what triggers us and what's going on. Like I know my mother-in-law had said to my husband a couple days ago, I don't like Christmas because nothing good ever happens at Christmas. Because as a child, she was abused heavily.
Mm-hmm.
And during Christmas, it got worse because
Yeah.
there was stress around money, there was
Yeah.
stress around a lot of things. And so, unfortunately, a lot of us go through life, and she goes through life and she doesn't have that level of awareness to see, oh, I'm continuing to hurt myself.
Yeah.
I'm continuing to live in that abused state because that's what I'm used to. My
Uh-huh.
body's used to it, so I'm going to keep torturing myself.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's sad. And we do that so often.
Yeah.
And it does get worse for most of us during the holidays.
Yeah. So I was watching, I always bring it back to these testimonials because they're so freaking good
Mhm.
and there's such a great teaching thing. But there was a girl that healed herself from massive PTSD from her childhood trauma. Her mom tried to drown her at a young age. Her mom heavily abused her. Then her mom like married her stepdad, and he was a police officer who also abused her. So there was a lot of abuse in her household, right? And she grew up someone with very severe PTSD and severe anxiety, severe depression, all the things that go along with that, right? And she just didn't feel like she could go out into society, really. She just hid herself from the world. Well, she
Yeah.
started to realize that she needed to like look at herself in this way. And it's hard, okay? I'm not going to say that this is easy, but someone with PTSD and any kind of trauma like this, my hat is off to you because there's a lot that you got to work through for sure.
Yeah.
So, but she had to look at herself and she had to realize that she did not want to heal because she was so used to being mistreated. She was so
Mhm.
used to being abused that even when
Exactly.
the actual abuse was over in her environment, she continued to abuse herself.
hmm Yeah.
And she said that she would have panic attacks that would last for 30 hours a week. She said she timed them. She said, I had a full time job panicking. Okay. Like that's literally what she was doing. Full time job panicking, 30 hours a week. Okay. And she had to really look at herself and go, you know what? I'm safe. I
Yeah.
don't have to go back to the past. I don't have to keep torturing myself. But she got to this new level of awareness where she actually looked at what she was doing and she realized that the turning point for her was when she realized she didn't want to heal.
Yeah.
And that's the turning point I feel like for a lot of us when we torture ourselves with
hmm
things in our life that we don't allow is because there's something that we don't want to change. We want to stay in that level of energy because that's what we're used to. And
Yeah.
when we look at ourselves and we go, I don't want to change.
Yeah.
And then that's when the game begins because then it's like, but what if I did want to change? What if I
hmm
do want to do something different? And
Yeah.
so she said that she didn't start meditating. She just started watching her thoughts. She just
Mhm.
started noticing when she would go into these catastrophizing thoughts, right? And then
Yeah.
she would remind herself that she's safe, right? And so she kept doing that over and over and over again. You keep doing that at a certain point, your body kind of like, your body's going to throw up a lot of like, oh,
Uh,
I'm pissed at you. Like I'm craving the feeling of feeling
Yeah.
unsafe because that's what I'm used to.
Yeah.
So your body is just going to want to be in that anxiety. I mean, that's where those anxiety attacks come from because our body is just like, oh no, I want to feel this way.
Mhm.
And so you keep doing that though. You keep settling the body back down into the present moment. And that's when there's this huge release of energy that comes from you that you're like,
Mhm.
oh my God, like I don't have to live like that anymore. And that's
It's
when,
or yeah.
yeah, that's when life changes, when you can get to that point. So, but her, I was listening to her testimonial, was it yesterday? And I was like, ooh, this is hitting me at a perfect time because
Mhm.
it's like my body, since working with that surgeon, and I had a patient that was not doing well at one point because of the quickness of the speed. I had to look at myself and go, okay, I don't need to continue to feel like this is an unsafe environment. I can allow myself to
Mhm.
settle into this moment where nothing is happening. I can just allow myself to be in this situation.
For sure.
And there's so much of a gift in that, in realizing those kind of things in your life and realizing that every situation has something to teach you, regardless of what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that people always joke about you really know how much growth you've had when you go home or and when
Mm-hmm.
you go home for Christmas. But when you
Yeah.
go back to your family, you really can tell how much growth you've done and how much you really have to do.
100%. I mean, I can tell you, um, even just a year ago, I can look at myself and be like, ooh, I've changed a lot because I've become, I would say, more allowing in a lot of ways where I'm like, they're allowed to think that, they're allowed to do that. I don't have to agree with them, and that's okay. Right?
Yeah.
Like, but that's not always an easy thing to come to, right? Like, um, what's a good example? Okay, here's a good example. So Matthew and I sometimes, like when my nieces are having a tantrum, we'll be like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad that," like under our breath, "I'm so glad we don't have kids," but it'll get heard, and my sister-in-law, and my brother get really like, "What the
Hmm.
hell?" And we both had to come to the realization where it was like, we're allowed to think what we think about not wanting to have kids just as
Sure.
much as they're allowed to
Yeah.
think that they want us to have kids. They're allowed to think that, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that that's what I have to do,
And it's
right?
that's a weird thing. Why? I don't know.
I th-
Like,
I honestly think it's just a reflection of them, if that makes
mm,
sense. Like
yeah.
we look at our life, and I always have to like frame this in my mind. We look at our life and we go, everything that I do, everybody else should do. Right?
Hmm.
Like that's how we look at life. Like this is why people get so upset about politics, religion, what have you, because we look at life and we've reasoned that this makes sense for us. And
Yeah.
so if somebody doesn't fit in that box, it can make us uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
that's okay. Like I don't mind if you're uncomfortable, but I also don't need to cater my life to what somebody else thinks, right? Like
Yeah.
just because you think I need to do something um or whatever, like it has no bearing on what I actually need to do in my life, right? Because this is my life, this is my creation, and that's your creation.
Yeah.
But even a year ago, I probably would have been more frustrated with the responses that I was getting whenever at Thanksgiving, Matthew and I, under our breath, were like, oh my God, I'm so glad we don't have kids right now. But the responses that we were getting, I was like, yeah, it's okay that you have kids. I love that you love your kids, because my brother was like, I love our kids and blah, blah, blah. They're amazing. And I was like, I'm so glad that you do. I want
Yeah.
you to love your kids. I want you to love your life so much that you just are like, I couldn't imagine anything else. That's what I
Yeah.
want for everybody. But
Yeah.
I don't necessarily have to fit into that box, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't have to do something or feel a certain way because you think that I should.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think that's a great reminder for everyone at Christmas time. One, that if anyone says, like, oh, are you dating someone? Oh, do you have kids yet? Oh, have you moved up in your career yet? Or whatever. My hair's dyed, like, you got a new tattoo. Their thoughts are a reflection of them.
Yes.
And you don't have to take any ownership of that whatsoever.
Yeah.
Also, your thoughts about everyone around you is a reflection of you. So don't put that onto them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which sometimes it's hard because a lot of times we have opinions and we
Yes.
think that our opinions are important.
Yeah.
I know I do this. But I've really been noticing recently, this is something I've been really noticing, holding back on opinions, that it's like, is this really adding to the situation? Why do I feel like I need to share this right now? I've
Yeah.
I've been asking myself that a whole lot more. Why do I think that I need to share this right now? Do I actually need to share this, or am I saying this because I want to just whatever in the situation? I think that someone should think the way that I do. Or does
Yeah.
it really have bearing, or am I just shooting shit right now,
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
yeah. Life, it's a freaking process. Let's just say that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
In case we haven't said it yet, Merry Christmas to everybody.
Merry Christmas.
And I think this is a good time for us to say TMI advice you didn't want is a wrap for today. So, friends, if you are watching us on YouTube, go ahead and give us a like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments what you think about all this. We covered a lot during this episode for sure. We honestly, when we started this, we were like, we don't know where we're going with this, but let's go for it. And that's when all the good stuff ends up coming out. So let us know in the comments what your thoughts are. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast host, go ahead and give us a 5-star and let us know in the comments what your thoughts are as well. So with that, we're going to call TMI, Advice You Didn't Want, a wrap for today. See everyone next time. Thanks so much for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue hanging out with us, and don't forget to subscribe.